The invitation was already printed, listing my beach villa as the venue. The local paper called it the Hale Family Estate. I found my mother inside, tasting cakes and rearranging my furniture for my sister's wedding, a wedding I wasn't hosting. When the police cruisers arrived later, she thought I was being cruel. She had no idea the truth was just beginning. My name is Cassidy Hale, and the quiet hum of the Tesla's electric engine was the only sound as I turned onto the crushed shell driveway. It was Tuesday. I should have been downtown, in a glass-walled conference room at Northbridge Capital, dissecting the risk profile of a Brazilian logistics firm. Instead, I was here, under the crisp October sky of Greywater Bay, because the final deck for that very presentation was sitting on my home office desk. A simple mistake, a forgotten file. I killed the engine and the silence of the coast rushed in, broken only by the distant cry of a gull and the rhythmic sigh of the surf against the shore. This place, this house, was my sanctuary, built by my grandmother, Catherine, with timber and stone and a will that matched the rugged coastline. It was the one corner of the world that was unequivocally mine, a fortress of solitude I had inherited, paid the taxes on, and maintained with my own 2 hands and the healthy salary my 60-hour work weeks afforded me. The front door was ajar. A sliver of warmth and light spilled onto the bluestone porch. Strange, I never left it open. A prickle of unease, the low-grade hum of a variable in the wrong column, ran up my spine. I pushed the heavy oak door inward, and then I heard them. Voices, not the hushed tones of an intruder, but the bright, confident chatter of people who believed they belonged. They were in my dining room. "No, Margaret, the hydrangeas are too much. Too provincial. We need something classic, white roses, peonies, maybe thousands of them. Lila, darling, we have to consider the sea air. Roses will wilt before the I-dos are even done. We need something heartier. It's a family tradition. After all, the Hales have always had gardenias by the sea." My mother, Margaret Hale, and my younger sister, Lila. I stood frozen in the foyer, my leather briefcase slipping in my suddenly slick palm. The presentation, the Brazilian firm, the entire world of structured finance evaporated, replaced by the immediate, violating reality of my mother and sister planning a wedding in my house, without me, without my permission. My dining room table, a solid piece of reclaimed oak I'd spent a month sourcing, was covered in a topography of bridal magazines, fabric swatches, and cake designs on an iPad. Margaret was holding a swatch of ivory silk against a champagne-colored ribbon, her brow furrowed in the same theatrical concentration she applied to seating charts at charity galas. Lila, my beautiful, perpetually innocent sister, was scrolling through a Pinterest board titled "Seaside Dream Wedding." The phrase hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. The family house. My mother had used it twice. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a statement of policy. A policy I had never agreed to. It was a tiny needle, expertly slid into the same nerve it had been striking for 34 years. My eyes scanned the beautiful mess on my table. Tucked beside a 3-tiered cake model was a stack of elegant, cream-colored cardstock. I could make out the calligraphy from where I stood. Lila Hale Evan Cole, request the pleasure of your company. And below it, the address, my address. The date was 6 weeks from now. A small, neatly printed number in the corner read 200 guests. Here, a tremor started in my hands, a low-frequency vibration of pure, unadulterated rage. But my face remained placid. My training took over. In my world, panic is a liability. Emotion is a risk to be quantified and mitigated. I didn't explode. I didn't rush in. Screaming about boundaries and ownership, I went cold. The fury didn't vanish. It crystallized, hardening into something sharp and clear and infinitely more dangerous. My silence was no longer acquiescence. It was bait. I slipped my phone from my pocket. A quick, silent search. There it was. A post from my mother on Instagram. 3 days old. A stunning, professionally shot photo of my house at sunset. the windows glowing like embers. The caption read, "So thrilled to continue a beautiful family tradition at our seaside home for Lila's wedding. Some places are just in our blood. Hail Legacy family, home Greywater Bay wedding. Our seaside home." The scene cut in my mind, a jarring jump back to last Tuesday. A family dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant downtown, one of those places with more foam than food. It was ostensibly to celebrate Lila's engagement. Evan Cole, the fiancé, sat beside her, radiating a practiced, easy charm. My father was there, a quiet, peripheral figure, content to let Margaret orchestrate the evening, as he had let her orchestrate their entire lives. And then, over dessert, Margaret had tapped her water glass with a spoon, a gesture that always preceded an imperial decree. "I have the most wonderful news," she'd announced to the table, her voice carrying to the surrounding diners, friends of hers who had been strategically invited. "Cassidy, in her infinite generosity, has offered us the family house for the wedding. It's just so perfect. A true Hale wedding, right where it's meant to be." Every eye at the table, and several from the tables nearby, turned to me, a spotlight of expectation. A silent, immense pressure to perform the role I had always been assigned: the stable, responsible, accommodating older daughter. To deny it would be to create a scene, to brand myself as selfish, cruel, to correct her, to say, "You mean my house, and you never asked," was an act of social violence I wasn't prepared to commit in that moment. So I smiled, a tight, bloodless smile, and I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Checkmate. Her friends beamed. My father looked relieved. Lila clapped her hands in delight. They saw my nod as confirmation. I saw it as the moment I started logging evidence. Now, standing in my own foyer, an uninvited guest in my own life, I could see the full scope of the campaign, the magazine article a friend had texted me last week, a fluffy piece in Seattle Coast Living on Legacy Families of Greywater Bay, featuring a picture of my parents and Lila, with a caption mentioning the historic Hale family estate, soon to host the wedding of the year. My house, which I inherited directly from my grandmother. Not them, my legacy, reframed as theirs. I took a quiet step back, into the shadow of the hallway. I didn't want to be seen, not yet. I was still gathering data. From the dining room, Lila's voice, sweet and untroubled. "Evan found the most incredible dress. Mom, it's Vera Wang, $8,000. But he said I'm worth it." "Of course you are, my love," Margaret cooed. "And Evan is such a dear, so successful." Evan Cole. I'd met him 3 times. He spoke in vague, impressive-sounding terms about his work, something to do with a private fund for high-net-worth clients. He wore a watch that was a little too big, laughed a little too loudly. He looked at my mother more than he looked at Lila. My internal risk assessment of him was a flashing red light. He was a leveraged asset with no underlying collateral. My mind dredged up a lifetime of similar moments, a long, gray reel of memories. Not of abuse, never anything so clear-cut. It was a quieter, more insidious form of erosion. Me, at 12, being told to help Lila with her science project all weekend because she was the creative one, and I was the responsible one. Me, at 17, giving up my spot on a summer trip to Europe because the money was needed for Lila's elite riding camp. Me, in my 20s, co-signing for Lila's first apartment because my credit was perfect, and hers was, in my mother's words, a work in progress. Each time, it was framed not as a sacrifice, but as my natural duty. I wasn't a person. I was a resource. The family's designated adult. I had to get the file. I took a deep, steadying breath and stepped out of the shadows, forcing a look of mild surprise onto my face. "Mom, Lila, what are you guys doing here?" Their heads snapped up. Margaret's face, for a fraction of a second, registered a flicker of annoyance, the look of a general whose sovereign territory has been unexpectedly entered, but it vanished instantly, replaced by a brilliant, dazzling smile. "Cassidy, darling, we were just getting a head start on some planning. The time is just flying by, she said, rising to give me an air kiss that smelled of Chanel and entitlement. I just came back to grab a file I forgot for work, I said, my voice even, calm. My gaze drifted over the mountain of wedding paraphernalia. Wow, you've been busy. Isn't it wonderful? Lila chirped, oblivious. Mom has the most amazing ideas for the flowers on the veranda. I nodded slowly, my eyes meeting my mother's. It's a lot of work, and a lot of people. 200 guests. That's a big event for a residential property. We'll need to talk about the event insurance, vendor contracts, liability waivers. I let the words hang in the air. They were my world. Contracts. Liability, paperwork, the unglamorous, ironclad scaffolding that holds everything up. Margaret waved a dismissive, perfectly manicured hand. Her smile was a weapon, expensive and sharp. Oh, Cassidy, don't be so pragmatic. It's a family party, not a corporate merger. We'll handle all the little details. You just worry about your work. We'll handle it. The royal we. That was it. That was the final data point I needed. It wasn't an oversight. It was a hostile takeover, executed with floral arrangements and champagne ribbons. Right, I said, producing a small, polite smile of my own. The file. I'll just be a minute. I walked past them, through my home, and up the stairs to my office. I found the presentation, slipped it into my briefcase, and walked back down. They were already re-immersed in their discussion. My presence a forgotten interruption. I let myself out, the heavy door clicking shut behind me. Back in my car. I didn't start the engine. I just sat, the leather cool against my skin. I looked at the house, my house. The afternoon sun was catching the western-facing windows, making them gleam. I saw the strong, clean lines of the roof against the sky. A roof I had paid to have replaced 2 years ago. My fury was gone, burned away by the cold. Clean oxygen of purpose. They thought my silence was weakness. They thought my pragmatism was a character flaw to be managed and dismissed. They had made a critical error. They had assessed the risk and gotten it completely, catastrophically wrong. I pulled out my phone again, ignoring the unread emails from my team. I opened my calendar. I navigated to the weekend of the wedding, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I created a new event, blocking out all 3 days from dawn until midnight. I typed in the title, On-Site Project Mandatory. Then I put the car in reverse and pulled away. The shells of my own driveway crunching under the wheels. The bluff had been called. And I was about to show them my hand. The drive back to my apartment in Seattle was an exercise in controlled breathing. The crystalline rage I felt in Greywater Bay hadn't thawed. It had simply been moved to cold storage. My mind, trained to identify, quantify, and neutralize risk, was already segmenting the problem. Assumption, misrepresentation, trespass, liability. My calendar alert pinged. 10:00 a.m. Brazil Logistics, deep dive. I pulled over, the city skyline gray and indifferent across the water, and typed a quick message to my team. Something urgent has come up. Take the lead. I'll review the minutes by EOD. Pivot to risk profile, 4A. I didn't go to the office. I drove downtown, but to a different kind of tower. The King County Recorder's Office. This wasn't an act of self-doubt. I knew I owned the house. I paid the mortgage, a small one I'd taken out for renovations, and the astronomical property taxes. I knew what my grandmother Catherine's will said. But in my profession, knowing is subjective. Proving is objective. I needed the certified, government-stamped, undeniable proof, the clerk. A woman who looked bored by the very concept of gravity, took my parcel number. 10 minutes and $40 later, I was holding a crisp, clean copy of the statutory warranty deed. I stood in the sterile hallway, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and read the legal text. Grantor Catherine Hale, an unmarried woman, as her separate estate. Grantee Cassidy Hale, an unmarried woman, as her separate estate. I scanned the entire document. My mother's name, Margaret, was not on it. My father's name was not on it. There were no covenants, no trusts, No riders mentioning family use or Hale legacy. There was only Catherine's signature and mine. It was a clean, simple transfer of title, a fortress, just as she'd intended. I folded the document, the raised seal a hard little bump under my thumb, and slipped it into my briefcase next to the Brazil presentation. It was the first piece of my counter-narrative. My next call wasn't to a high-priced corporate firm. I drove to a small coffee shop in Ballard, sat in my car, and dialed a local Greywater Bay number. Marilyn Shaw. Her voice was like gravel and strong coffee. Marilyn, it's Cassidy Hale. Cassidy, don't tell me you're calling about the church bake sale, because I'm already 2 pies deep. Marilyn Shaw was 70, retired from the state attorney's office, and the sharpest legal mind on the coast. We'd bonded over a shared love of brutally early mornings and a mutual disdain for bad espresso at the local cafe. I wish, I said. I'm calling for advice. I have a boundary issue that's escalating into a property rights violation. A pause. Family. Go on, I laid it out, sticking to the facts, the uninvited planning session. The printed invitations with my address, the 200 guest count, the articles and social media posts claiming it as a family estate, the public ambush at the restaurant, the dismissal of my concerns about liability. I kept my voice flat, the tone of a risk analyst presenting a findings report. Marilyn was quiet for a long time. I could hear the faint sound of a NPR broadcast in her kitchen. Well, hell, she said finally. They're not just crossing a line. Cassidy, they're staging an occupation. Legally, it's simple. It's your house. You tell them no. You put up a no trespassing sign. You call the sheriff if they show up. I know, I said. But the social and reputational fallout. My mother is a master of public relations. She's already framed me as the generous host. If I just say no, I'm the villain. I'm the cruel, ungrateful daughter who ruined her sister's perfect day. Ah, Marilyn's voice sharpened. So it's not a legal problem. It's a strategic one. They've built a narrative. You need a better one. One built on facts, not assumptions. Exactly. They've put you in a box where your only move is to detonate the entire relationship. So you need a third option, a move they don't see coming. Start gathering your facts. Cassidy, hard facts, not she said, but I have the recording. Is that legal? Washington is a 2-party consent state for private conversations unless you're in a place where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy. Your kitchen, your living room. That's debatable, but if you're recording on your own property and they have no reasonable expectation of privacy because they aren't supposed to be there discussing this, it gets murky. A better way. What's the better way? Put up a sign. This property is under 24-hour audio and video surveillance, a small one, by the door. That's your consent. Then, install your system. Let them walk right past it. The call ended. I didn't buy a sign. That was too overt. It would tip my hand, but Marilyn had given me the kernel of the idea. I didn't need to debate them. I needed to document their assumptions. That evening, I did the digital deep dive. This wasn't the casual, shocked search from the day before. This was an excavation. I archived the Seattle Coast Living article and my mother's Instagram post using a web capture tool that logged the date and URL. Then I went deeper. I found the Facebook page of my mother's closest friend, Cynthia Davies, a public post, a photo of her and my mother, clinking champagne glasses on my back porch. The caption, "Celebrating Lila's engagement at the gorgeous Hale estate in Greywater. Margaret is a miracle worker. Pulling this wedding together so fast. Hale legacy." I saved it. I found the caterer's website. They had a blog post, thrilled to be selected for the Hale Cole wedding at their magnificent private bayfront property. I saved it. I cross-referenced the vendors Lila had tagged. The florist. The rental company, all of them referred to it as the Hale family property. My mother hadn't just told them. She had briefed them. She was building a commercial consensus that this was her venue. The next step was harder. I needed to hear it from them. I drove back to Greywater Bay the next afternoon. Timing my arrival for 300 p.m., I knew my mother's schedule. Tuesday was her planning day with Lila. I parked down the street, out of sight. I texted my mother, heading to the coast to pick up my grandmother's silver. Forgot it's Tuesday. Just running in. Don't get up. I'll be 5 minutes. I let myself in the back door. Through the mudroom. As predicted. They were in the dining room again. The table now a sea of linen samples. "Cassidy back again," Margaret called out, her voice bright but laced with the distinct annoyance of an interruption. "Just grabbing the silver," I called back. I moved quickly, my briefcase in hand. "Don't mind me." I went to the dining room hutch, opened it, and pretended to rummage. While my back was turned, I slipped a small, voice-activated digital recorder, the kind reporters use, wafer-thin under the hutch itself, adhering it to the underside. I went to the living room. "Just checking the fireplace flue," I called. I knelt, pretending to look up the chimney, and slid a second recorder behind a heavy, seldom-moved antique speaker. The last one went in the kitchen, tucked magnetically up under the vent hood. "Got it," I said, holding up a random silver serving spoon. "You two have fun. Looks complicated." "It is, darling," my mother said, already turning back to a swatch of dove gray. "But it will be worth it." I left. I didn't retrieve the recorders for 2 days. On Thursday night, in my silent Seattle apartment, I plugged the recorders into my laptop. I put on my best noise-canceling headphones and pressed play. I built the micro-dossier, just as the outline in my head suggested. A new document, file, Greywater Evidence Log, Docs. I didn't just listen, I transcribed. I noted the time, the speaker, and the tone. Speaker Lila, tone hesitant. "Mom, are you sure Cassidy is okay with us moving all her office furniture into the garage? That big desk, it looks really important. And what about her files?" Speaker Margaret, tone dismissive, amused. "Darling, it's just work. This is her family. She needs to learn priorities. It's not a suggestion. We are moving it. The contractor needs that entire room for the bridal suite setup. We'll just put all her boxes in storage for a month. She'll get over it. She's pragmatic. She'll see it makes sense." My stomach tightened. She's pragmatic. The word she used to neuter me. I scrolled to another file. A phone call. My mother. Clearly on speaker. Talking to a vendor. Speaker Margaret. Tone imperious. Charming. "The 28th is perfect. Yes, 600 a.m. setup. The staff entrance is around the back. Don't worry about my older daughter. Cassidy. She technically owns the house. Yes, but it's a family property. She'll pout for a day about the fuss, but she wouldn't dare say no. It would look absolutely terrible for her. She knows her duty." There it was, the thesis of her entire operation. She wouldn't dare say no. My duty. My supposed fear of looking terrible. She wasn't just planning a wedding. She was leveraging my entire personality, my stability, my aversion to conflict, my pragmatism as unpaid collateral for her social ambitions. I saved the audio files. I encrypted the drive. I created 3 backups, one on a local SSD, one on my secure cloud server, and one on a thumb drive. I dropped into my fireproof safe. I saved the transcriptions and printed a hard copy, which I placed with the certified deed. The dossier was complete. The next morning, I called Marilyn Shaw. "I have the documentation," I said. "Social media, vendor communications, and audio, it's exactly what we thought. The core assumption is, and I quote, 'She wouldn't dare say no.'" "Excellent," Marilyn said. The satisfaction in her voice was palpable. "They're operating on social contracts. You are now operating on property law. They've built their entire plan on a foundation of sand, your presumed compliance. You're about to replace that sand with steel. So I send a cease and desist," I stated. "I send them the audio files. I confront them." "Absolutely not," Marilyn snapped. "A cease and desist is a warning. A confrontation is a negotiation. You're done warning, and you're finished negotiating. You don't argue with them. You don't talk to them at all. You make your move, and you let them discover it." "What move?" "You're a risk analyst. Cassidy. So analyze. Their entire event is dependent on one single asset, your house, an asset you control. So, you execute a prior claim on that asset. I don't follow, I said. Marilyn's voice was cold, clean, and perfect. You sign an exclusive, ironclad, fully insured rental contract for the exact dates of that wedding. You lease your property to a legitimate, insured, third-party business. When your mother shows up on that Friday with a truck full of flowers, she won't be arguing with her pragmatic daughter. She'll be trespassing on a commercial agreement, and she'll be doing it in front of the police, who you will have pre-notified. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't just a strategy. It was a legal, contractual, and utterly impersonal removal of their foundation. It wasn't an emotional explosion. It was a controlled demolition. Marilyn, I said, that is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. I thought you'd like it, she replied. Now go find a renter. I didn't waste time. My search for a renter took precisely 45 minutes. I wasn't looking for a vacationer on a short-term rental site. I was looking for a corporate client, a legitimate, insured, professional entity that would not buckle under social pressure. I found Coastal Frame LLC, a high-end commercial photography firm based in Seattle, specializing in architectural and luxury interior catalogs. Their portfolio was immaculate clean lines, dramatic light, and million-dollar properties presented as sterile, beautiful art. They were exactly what I needed: a business with heavy equipment, significant insurance requirements, and a professional crew that would not be intimidated by a woman in a mother-of-the-bride dress. I bypassed their standard booking portal and used my Northbridge Capital credentials to find the contact for the principal, Daniel Reeves. I sent an email from my corporate account, not my personal one. The subject line was Private Inquiry, Greywater Bay Property, Urgent Project, EOW. He responded in 15 minutes. We met the next day at his downtown Seattle studio. The space was minimalist perfection. Polished concrete floors, stark white walls, massive diffused lights. Daniel Reeves matched his brand. He was in his late 40s, sharp, elegant, wearing a perfectly tailored black blazer over a simple gray shirt. He didn't waste time on small talk, which I appreciated. Ms. Hale, your email was concise. What's the project? I have an off-market property in Greywater Bay, I said. I slid a thin portfolio across the polished table professional shots I'd had taken for my insurance policy. I'm offering it, gratis, for a catalog shoot, but I have non-negotiable terms. He raised a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Gratis. In exchange for exclusive, uninterrupted use for one specific weekend, and a full digital copy of the finalized portfolio for my private use, and absolute discretion. He studied the photos of the house, his expression unreadable. This is Catherine Hale's place. The one on the point. I tried to get in there for Architectural Digest 5 years ago. She turned me down flat. She was my grandmother, I said, and she valued privacy, as do I. The property has attracted some unwelcome assumptions recently. I need to establish a clear, legally binding, prior engagement for the weekend of Friday, November 28th. Daniel looked up, his gaze analytical. He wasn't a gossip. He was a businessman sniffing out a complication. Assumptions. A family matter, I said, my voice flat. They believe the house is available for an event. It is not. I see. A flicker of understanding. You need a block, a professional one. You're not just offering a location. You're hiring us to occupy it, and the shoot is the legal pretext. The shoot is the purpose, I corrected him smoothly. My terms are the contract. A slow smile touched the corner of his mouth. You're from Northbridge Capital. You assess vulnerabilities. So let's assess this. My crew. My gear. This is a $150,000 operation for a weekend. If we mobilize and your family matter shows up and gets in the way, I lose time and money. I can't have a screaming relative interrupting a $20,000 a day photographer. You won't, I said. That's what the contract is for. We drafted it right there, It was routed to his lawyer and to Marilyn Shaw, who reviewed it via a secure link within the hour. This wasn't a simple rental agreement. It was an exclusive license and service agreement, a technical document. The details were cold, they were precise, and they were designed to bite. Grant of license Cassidy Hale. Licensor grants Coastal Frame LLC. Licensee sole, exclusive, and uninterrupted access to the property located at my address, Greywater Bay, including all structures and grounds. Term, the license shall commence at 18 Sujras, 6:00 p.m. on Friday, November 28th, and terminate precisely at 18:00, 6:00 p.m. on Sunday, November 30th. Access Security Licensee is authorized to secure the premises against all unauthorized entry. Licensor will provide all keys and access codes. Licensee agrees to provide their own bonded, professional security team, minimum 2 personnel for the duration of the term to protect their equipment. Any individual not on the pre-approved crew list to be filed as Appendix A will be denied access and treated as a trespasser. Police notification licensee is authorized and required to file a Notice of Commercial Filming Activity Private Security Detail with the Greywater Bay Sheriff's Department, providing a copy of this agreement and the crew list. Insurance licensee will provide a certificate of insurance for a $5 million general liability policy, naming Cassidy Hale as an additional insured party. Cancellation penalty fee. This was the clause Marilyn insisted on. It was beautiful. Licensor agrees to pay a non-refundable service mobilization fee of $5,000 upon execution. Furthermore, should licensor Cassidy Hale breach this agreement or fail to provide exclusive access as stipulated, thereby causing a cancellation within the 72-hour operational window, licensor shall pay a liquidated damages penalty of $25,000 to licensee for mobilization, lost time, and project rescheduling. This was my shield. It was also my sword. If my mother, through some unforeseen emotional barrage, somehow broke me down and convinced me to cave, it would cost me $25,000. I was putting my own money on the line, building a firewall against my own potential for weakness. The penalty is the point, I told Daniel, answering his unasked question. It ensures my compliance as much as yours. It makes the contract unbreakable. He nodded, a look of pure professional respect in his eyes. I like it. It's clean. I authorized the $5,000 wire transfer from my personal account. The confirmation hit my inbox before I left his studio. You'll receive the crew list, 15 names, and the vehicle manifest by tomorrow, Daniel said, standing to shake my hand. My team will be on site at 1750 on the 28th to begin setup. Thank you. Mr. Reeves, I appreciate your professionalism. Ms. Hale, he replied. I'm not just a professional, I'm a perfectionist. We will be uninterrupted, and you will get your photos. By 4:00 p.m. that day, the agreement was countersigned, notarized by a mobile service, and a copy was electronically filed with the county recorder's office. It was now a public record, a prior lien attached to the property's deed history. The next 2 weeks were an exercise in methodical dismantling. I spent my days at Northbridge, modeling financial risk, and my evenings at Greywater Bay. Sterilizing my life, I was systematic. I packed every personal photograph, every book, every piece of clothing. My grandmother's silver, which I'd used as my first excuse, was carefully bubble-wrapped and removed. I paid a bonded moving company to come on a Wednesday. When I knew my mother and Lila were at a dress fitting, they transported my large oak desk, my ergonomic chair, my file cabinets, and my computers to a climate-controlled storage unit in Seattle. When I was done, the house was a sterile, beautiful shell. It was the Hale estate of my mother's imagination, a flawless, impersonal show home, devoid of any trace of the woman who actually lived there. It was perfect for a high-end catalog shoot. It was also, I noted with a cold flicker of satisfaction, a terrible, echoing, and unwelcoming place for a wedding. There was no warmth left, no life, just angles and expensive, empty surfaces. My final piece of preparation was logistical. I went online and booked a room at the Harborview Hotel. It's the only other major structure on the bay, situated on the opposite point. My grandmother had always hated it, calling it an eyesore. But its single virtue was its clear, unobstructed, binocular distance view of my property. I booked a Bayview King Suite for Friday the 28th and Saturday the 29th. I was the general, and this was my command post. I assembled a packet for Daniel Reeves. It contained 2 sets of high-security keys, the garage and gate codes, and the contact number for the property's caretaker, a local man I paid to check the pipes, not me. I included a brief, type note. Mr. Reeves, thank you for your business. All access codes and keys are enclosed. My caretaker has been notified of your team's arrival. I will be unreachable on a corporate assignment in Europe until Monday. Best, C. Hale. I messengered the packet to his studio. I did not mention a wedding. I did not mention my family. My side of the transaction was complete. All legal tracks were laid, running parallel to my mother's delusional ones, but mine were made of steel. The call came exactly as I knew it would. Thursday night. The night before the wedding weekend, I was in my Seattle apartment, checking the charge on my best pair of binoculars. My phone buzzed. The caller ID Margaret Hale. This was the moment, the final test of the she wouldn't dare say no theory. I let it ring 3 times. I took a steadying breath. I answered, my voice perfectly neutral. Hi, Mom. Cassidy. Thank God. Her voice was a whirlwind of false energy, the kind she used when she was stressed but pretending to be in control. I've been calling the house phone. Why don't you answer? Listen, I'm sending over the final vendor list. I need you to be at the house all day tomorrow to let them in. The flowers arrive at 8 a.m., and the tent company needs the entire lawn staked out before 10. The caterer will be there by 11. She was giving me orders, a logistics manager assigning tasks to an unpaid intern. I need you to be there. I can't, I said. The line went utterly silent. It was so quiet, I could hear the tiny digital echo of her breathing. What? She finally said, the words small and sharp. What do you mean? You can't. I'm at the airport, I said. It was a perfect, clean, beautiful lie. I'm flying to Zurich for an emergency risk assessment. A client's portfolio is collapsing. I won't be back until Monday. Zurich, her voice spiked into a near shriek. Zurich, Cassidy, you cannot be serious. This is your sister's wedding. I need you at the house. I'm sorry, Mom. It's a mandatory work trip. Unavoidable. I let a note of false, weary apology enter my voice. You said you and the planner would handle all the little details, so I assumed you had it covered. I figured you didn't need me. But the house? The vendors who is going to let them in. The doors are locked, she stammered, the panic finally breaking through her imperious composure. I don't know, Mom. I'm afraid I can't help you. My flight is boarding. Cassidy, you will not do this to me. You call your work right now. You tell them. I can't. This is $1 billion account. Mom, I have to go. But the house, Lila, the guests. I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said, my voice suddenly as cold and calm as the wind off the bay. You always do. Good luck with the wedding. I hung up. The bluff was complete. I wasn't at the airport. I was 20 floors above downtown, looking at the city lights, and tomorrow, I wouldn't be in Zurich. I'd be at the Harborview Hotel, with a cup of black coffee, watching the show. My mother thought her only obstacle was a locked door. She had no idea that in less than 24 hours, the property would no longer be hers to enter. The contract was about to bite. My Zurich bluff hung in the air, a perfect cold fabrication. I had just hung up on my mother, her panic still echoing in my ear, when my phone vibrated again. I glanced at the screen, expecting Margaret's name to flash. A second, more desperate wave of attack. But it was Lila. My finger hovered over the decline button. I was in execution mode. My bag was packed for the Harborview Hotel. My data was secure. My contract was filed. Lila was part of the operation I was dismantling. Not someone to console, but it was 11:45 p.m. This was not a call about flower arrangements. This was a distress signal. Against my better judgment, I answered, Cass, are you really at the airport? Are you in Zurich? Her voice was small, thin, stripped of the bridal confidence I'd heard in my dining room. I'm handling a work crisis. Lila, I said, my voice noncommittal. Oh God, she's losing her mind. Cass. She wasn't crying. Not yet. She was reporting. She's in the car. I think she's driving to your house right now. She said she'd call a locksmith. She said you've betrayed the family. There's nothing for me to say about that, Lila. No, I know. She paused. I heard her take a long, shuddering breath, as if she was about to dive into cold water. I just wanted to say thank you. The word was so unexpected, it wrong-footed me completely. Thank you for what? For being you. You know, the strong one. Our amazing older sister. It was a phrase I'd heard my whole life, but it had always been weaponized. It was the preamble to an unreasonable request. You're so strong. Cassidy, you won't mind if you're so responsible. Cassidy, you'll handle this time. It sounded like an epitaph. Lila, what's wrong? I'm sitting in my apartment, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. And I'm surrounded by things, boxes and boxes of crystal glasses I hate, a seating chart for people I've never met. This $8,000 dress that feels like a costume. Mom helped me choose everything. She helped me choose the venue. She helped me choose the invitations. Her voice cracked, a single, sharp fracture. I don't think I'm happy. Cass, I don't think I've made a single decision about my own life in 5 years. Maybe not even about Evan. A cold, familiar dread settled in my stomach. This was the Lila crisis, the part in the family play where I was supposed to step in, smooth things over, and guide her back to the approved script. He's all she talks about, Lila continued, the words tumbling out now. How successful he is, how perfect he is for the Hale legacy, but he's not. Is he? She wasn't really asking me. She was asking the universe. He's avoidant, Cass. Whenever I try to talk about, I don't know, real things like money, or where we'll actually live, he makes a joke. He checks his watch. He starts telling some story about a high net worth client he's landing. It's all a show. It's performance. She let out a small, wet sniff. You know that really expensive-looking wine he always brings to dinner? The one he says is from an exclusive Napa vineyard. I was upset last night, and I Googled the label. It's $12 a bottle Merlot from a mass-market distributor. He just lies. About small things. About big things. It's all for show. This was it. This was the pivot point. The old Cassidy, the responsible one, would have jumped in right here. She would have said, Oh, Lila, all men are like that. He's just trying to impress you. Mom means well. It's just wedding jitters. It will all be fine. I would have done my job. I would have managed the risk. I would have absorbed her doubt and fed back a platitude. But the old Cassidy was gone. She'd been packed away with the rest of the personal effects and put in climate-controlled storage. My own voice, when it came, was quiet, colder than I intended. Lila, I'm not in Zurich. I'm in my apartment, and I can't tell you what to do. But I can ask you 2 questions. Okay, she whispered. First, do you love him? Not the show, not the legacy, not the expensive suit or the cheap wine. Do you love the man? Evan Cole. The silence on the line was a physical weight. It stretched for 10 seconds, then 20. I could hear the faint sound of traffic from her downtown apartment, a single, sharp exhale, not an answer. Second, I continued, are you free to choose right now if you wanted to call all 200 of those guests, and the caterer, and your mother, and tell them it's all off, could you? Or are you just the guest of honor at a party your mother is throwing for herself? The silence this time was different. It wasn't the sound of someone thinking. It was the sound of something breaking. When she spoke, her voice was unrecognizable. A brittle, bitter laugh punched out of her. Free to choose. That's adorable. Cass, really, we're Hales. Mom is mom. Her voice hardened, adopting a cynical, world-weary tone that chilled me to the bone. This is just adult reality, isn't it? This is what it means to grow up. You make the best choice you can, and you smile, and you show up. No, I thought, that's not adult reality. That's our reality. The specific, toxic ecosystem Margaret built. The one I fed and watered for 2 decades by being the strong one. That's a choice, Lila, I said. But it's not reality. I have to go. Wait, she almost shouted. Cass, what's going to happen on Friday at the house? She's really going to call a locksmith. She's going to break down the door. I have secured the property, I said. It was a statement of fact, not a threat. Good night, Leela. I hung up before she could reply. I stood in the darkness of my apartment, the floor-to-ceiling windows showing a city of indifferent lights. The phone call hadn't felt like a victory. It felt like listening to a casualty report from a war I had just escalated. My mind went tumbling back, a rapid, unbidden slideshow of my responsibilities. I wasn't remembering violence or cruelty. My childhood had no dramatic scars. It was just a long, gray, oppressive weight. It was me, at 13, sitting at the kitchen table with the household checkbook, balancing my mother's extravagant accounts because my father just couldn't handle the conflict, and I was so good with numbers. It was me, at 22, driving to Lila's dorm at 3 a.m. to pick her up after she'd wrecked her car, lying to our parents that I had been the one to hit a patch of ice, taking the insurance hit and the screaming lecture from my mother about irresponsibility because Lila couldn't have this on her record. It was every single holiday, every birthday, every family dinner where I was the designated driver, the conflict mediator, the one who listened, the one who absorbed, the one who handled it. I was never a participant in my family. I was its infrastructure. I was the load-bearing wall, expected to stand silent and strong while they lived their colorful, dramatic, messy lives, decorating the rooms I held up. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. I thought about the house in Greywater Bay. My grandmother Catherine hadn't just left me a piece of real estate. She had left me a weapon, a fortress. She had seen my mother, her own daughter-in-law, with perfect, terrifying clarity. The will hadn't just been a transfer of title. It had been an instruction. Marilyn's voice echoed in my head. Don't burn the bridge, Cassidy. Let them collapse it. My lie about Zurich wasn't burning the bridge. It was just me, finally, stepping off it. Margaret was the one already speeding toward the ravine, her foot flooring the accelerator, convinced the bridge would simply reappear because she willed it to. I felt a sudden, sharp, agonizing stab of pity. Not for my mother, for Lila, who was now sitting in a room full of boxes, clutching a $12 bottle of fake wine, about to marry a man she didn't love, all because she was too terrified to say no. My actions tomorrow, they would detonate her life. The humiliation would be public and profound. I was about to destroy her perfect day, the one she was clinging to as adult reality. I closed my eyes. The old instinct was still there, a dying ghost in my nerves, whispering, call Daniel Reeves. Pay the $25,000 penalty. It's just money. Let her have the house. Let her have her show. I opened them. No. What was I saving her from? A marriage built on a financial lie and emotional cowardice. A future as Margaret's primary puppet. A role I was finally abdicating. The truth, however brutal, was a cleaner blade. The humiliation I was about to inflict was acute, but the life I was saving her from was a chronic disease. I had spent 34 years being the kind one, the pragmatic one, the one who never, ever made a wave. I finally understood. Kindness, without a boundary, is just enablement. Being gentle doesn't mean you don't have teeth. It just means you choose, very carefully, when to bite. I picked up my overnight bag, the binoculars safely packed inside. I walked out of my apartment, my face set, my resolve as cold and hard as the notarized contract. The time for analysis was over. The bluff was set. Tomorrow, I would be at the Harborview Hotel, and I would watch them hit the steel. I zipped the overnight bag. Binoculars, chargers, a change of clothes, and the encrypted SSD drive containing the audio files. My conversation with Lila echoed in my head. Her brittle, cynical laugh. "This is just adult reality, isn't it?" My hand hovered over the bag. I was missing the final piece of the dossier. I walked to the steel fireproof safe concealed behind a bookcase in my study. I keyed in the code. Inside, next to the hard copy deed of the Greywater house and the printed transcripts of my mother's audio, was a small, dark velvet ring box. Beside it lay a single, tri-folded document, bearing the embossed letterhead of Maxwell Sons, Jewelers. My pity for Lila, that sharp, agonizing pang I'd felt earlier, evaporated. It was replaced by the cold, clean focus of a professional risk assessment. Her call hadn't been a shock. Her doubts hadn't surprised me. I had been waiting for them, because I knew, with the certainty of a notarized document, that her entire engagement was a fabrication. The investigation had started 3 weeks ago, during the sterilization of my house, as I was systematically emptying my life into labeled boxes. I was in my master bedroom, clearing my grandmother's heavy mahogany jewelry chest, and I saw it. Sitting brazenly on the polished wood, next to my grandmother's pearls, was Lila's engagement ring. It was an obnoxious thing, a massive cushion-cut stone that flashed with an almost too perfect, glassy fire, set on a platinum band crusted with smaller stones. I knew instantly what had happened. Lila, during one of her unauthorized planning sessions, had undoubtedly been in my room, trying on my grandmother's heirloom pieces another small, infuriating trespass, and had left her own ring behind. I picked it up. It felt light, the stone. When I looked at it under the clear light of the bay window, seemed hollow. I'm an analyst. I spend my days looking for the discrepancy between a prospectus and the reality. I spot high-grade fakes, whether they're in a financial report or on my dresser. This ring was a performance. I didn't call her. I didn't text my mother. I slipped it into my pocket. The next morning, I wasn't at Northbridge. I was at Maxwell Sons in downtown Seattle. They are old world, discreet, and have handled my grandmother's estate jewelry for decades. Mr. Davies, the senior gemologist, greeted me warmly. "Ms. Hale, a pleasure. What can we do for you?" "I need a formal appraisal on a family piece," I said, sliding the ring across the velvet mat. "For insurance purposes." He picked it up, his expression neutral, and fitted a loop to his eye. He turned it over, examined the setting, and breathed on the stone. The silence in the private viewing room stretched. He didn't look up. He just quietly said, "One moment." He was gone for 10 minutes. When he returned, his professional, placid mask was firmly in place. This was the look of a man about to deliver diplomatic, expensive bad news. "Ms. Hale," he began, placing the ring carefully on the mat. "This is a very well-crafted piece of costume jewelry." I didn't react. I just waited. "The setting," he continued, "is not platinum. It is high-grade .85 sterling silver, plated to look like platinum. It's a fine job. The side stones are well-set crystal." "And the center stone?" I asked. "The center stone is a superb quality cubic zirconia, 4-carat equivalent, a very good one, but it is not a diamond." "What is its value?" "For insurance replacement," he asked. "A subtle code." "For the truth," I said. He nodded, understanding. "As a piece of silver and CZ jewelry, its retail replacement value would be approximately $450. $450. The ring that had accompanied the $8,000 dress. The ring that was the centerpiece of the Hale legacy wedding. The ring Evan Cole had supposedly procured through his high-net-worth connections. "I need the formal appraisal document," I said, stating those facts. "Of course, Ms. Hale. I'll have it typed and stamped immediately." That document was now in my hand. It was Dossier C, and it had been the key. The ring wasn't an unfortunate choice. It was a symptom. It confirmed my flashing red light assessment of Evan Cole. He wasn't just tacky. He was a con artist. That night, my Zurich bluff, still weeks away from being needed. I didn't just run a background check. I ran a full, deep-dive forensic analysis, the kind I'd run on a hostile acquisition target. This wasn't personal. It was professional. I started with public records. It was astonishingly easy. Evan Cole was not a ghost. He was a disaster. Data point 1, King County Public Law Court records, 2 eviction notices from luxury, high-rise apartments in the last 18 months, both for non-payment of rent. Data point 2 U.S. Bankruptcy Court, Western District of Washington. A Chapter 7 bankruptcy filing, discharged 4 years prior, total unsecured debt, $184,000. Primarily credit cards and personal loans. Data point 3, civil judgments, a lien from the Ridgeline Yacht Club, a place my mother loved to be seen for $14,000 in unpaid membership dues and house bar tabs. He hadn't just visited. He'd dined and dashed on a corporate level. He wasn't private about his wealth. He was insolvent. Next, I moved to his digital footprint. This, I knew, was his real product. His Instagram, the one Lila and my mother followed, was a carefully curated fantasy. Data point 4. Social media forensics. That photo of him on the bow of a super yacht in the Mediterranean. I ran a reverse image search. It was a repost from a Russian travel blogger, originally posted in 2018. He'd just cropped the blogger out. That picture of his watch, a Patek Philippe next to a bottle of rare whiskey. The image was stolen from a luxury watch forum. The client dinners at Canlis, all reposts from local food critics, tagged with goals or the life. He wasn't living a luxurious life. He was creating a PowerPoint deck of one, built from other people's photos. He was selling a story. Finally, I analyzed his primary asset, his job. Data point 5, LinkedIn and corporate records. His profile was a masterpiece of empty jargon. Principal at EC Capital Partners, specializing in high net worth acquisitions and private equity. EC Capital Partners, according to the Delaware Secretary of State website, was a shell LLC registered 3 years ago for a $90 filing fee. It had no website, no SEC filings, no physical address. I used my Northbridge access to a professional verification service to check the company he claimed he'd worked for before going out on his own. The HR verification line was automated. I keyed in his social security number, which I'd pulled from the bankruptcy filing. The automated voice was clear. "We have no record of employment for this individual." The picture was complete. Evan Cole was a predator, a sophisticated, charismatic grifter who was likely drowning in new debt. He had found the perfect mark, not Lila. Lila was just the delivery mechanism. His true target was Margaret Hale, my mother. With her desperate, pathological need for social validation, had done all the work for him. She had broadcasted the Hale legacy. She had claimed the Hale estate, my house, as a family asset in magazines. She had presented her family as old money, powerful, and most importantly, liquid. Evan wasn't marrying Lila for her personality. He was executing a merger. He thought he was acquiring a multi-million-dollar waterfront compound, a family line of credit, and a network of my mother's wealthy, gullible friends. He was leveraging my mother's lies to finance his own. They were a perfect symbiotic match. I took the appraisal document and the velvet box. I placed them in the go bag on top of the binoculars. I sent a single, encrypted email to Marilyn Shaw. Subject FDD. Evan Cole Assessment Body. Marilyn, the situation has evolved. The fiancé is a fraud. The engagement ring is CZ. I have the formal appraisal, plus his bankruptcy file, eviction history, and proof of employment fabrication. This is no longer just a family property dispute. This is a performance of interlocking fraud. The package is attached. No action needed. This is for your records. Her reply came back in 2 minutes. Body. Good God. Cassidy, You're not just reclaiming a house, you're fumigating it. Proceed. This was why my call with Lila had been so final. Her late-night admission of doubt wasn't a cry for help. It was the last, dying flicker of her own intuition before she willfully extinguished it. When I'd asked her, "Do you love him?" I already knew him was a fictional character. I already knew, from the $12 wine she'd spotted, that she suspected it, too. The question that hung in the air of my apartment was simple. Why not just tell her? Why not send her the file? Show her the $450 appraisal? And spare her the public humiliation? The thought had crossed my mind, but my training told me it was the wrong move. It was the high-risk, low-reward path. If I sent that file to Lila now, in the dead of night, what would happen? She would confront Evan. He would lie. He would charm her, gaslight her, tell her I was the jealous, vindictive sister trying to sabotage her happiness. She would run to our mother, and Margaret, presented with a choice between a humiliating, fraudulent truth and a beautiful, high-status lie, would choose the lie. Every time. They would unite against me. The truth, delivered privately, would be labeled an attack. No. The truth, to be believed, had to be revealed in a secure, controlled environment. The lies had to be dismantled publicly, piece by piece, leaving no room for narrative spin. Evan and my mother had built this stage set. They had printed the programs. They had sold the tickets. The show had to happen. The wedding had to fail. Not because I stopped it, but because it was built on a foundation that couldn't support its own weight. Only then, when the entire, glittering, fraudulent structure collapsed around her, would Lila finally be free. I zipped the bag. The ring was a lie. The fiancé was a lie. The family house was a lie. My job tomorrow wasn't just to reclaim my property, it was to be the single, immovable, factual object that the entire performance would crash against. I checked into the Harborview King Suite at 17 Huzuro on Friday, 5 Huzuro p.m. The room was sterile, anonymous, and perfect. It smelled of industrial-grade disinfectant and the faint, sharp tang of the low tide. I didn't unpack my bag. I walked directly to the balcony, slid the heavy glass door open, and stepped out into the cold, damp air. Across the bay, my house stood on its point, a dark silhouette against the bruised purple of the twilight sky. It looked quiet, empty, waiting. I raised the binoculars. My hand was perfectly steady. I was not a participant. I was an observer, a risk analyst watching a variable in real time. At 17:50, 10 minutes early, a black Suburban with tinted windows rolled up my driveway. A man in a dark polo shirt stepped out, clearly security. He walked the perimeter, checking the locks and the garage. At 18 Huzure on the dot, the first production van from Coastal Frame LLC arrived. It was followed by a large, unmarked truck. The team moved with the quiet, unnerving efficiency of a military unit. There was no shouting, no wasted motion. The security lead met the production manager. Keys were exchanged. A generator, somewhere out of my sight, hummed to life. And then, room by room, my house lit up. Not with the warm, inviting glow I associated with home, but with the harsh, blue-white glare of professional work lights. They planted small, laminated signs at the base of my driveway. Just behind the gate, I focused the binoculars. The red letters were stark, private property. No trespassing. Production in progress. They strung a single, tight line of yellow caution tape between the stone pillars of my gate. The occupation was complete. I waited. Around 9:30 p.m., just as I'd anticipated. Headlights sliced through the darkness. My mother's white Escalade. It pulled up to the gate, stopping so abruptly the nose of the vehicle dipped. She got out. I watched her march to the yellow tape. She looked at the sign. She looked at the brightly lit house, now bustling with strangers. She stopped. Her body language screamed confusion. This wasn't the plan. The plan was a dark house and a locked door she could break. I saw her pull out her phone, her face illuminated by its screen. She was calling me, calling the Zurich number. I watched her hold the phone to her ear. Listen, then pull it away and stare at it. Enraged, She tried again. She paced in front of the gate, a caged, furious animal, finally, defeated by a piece of laminated paper and a 150-sound line of plastic tape. She got back in her car and sped away. Phase 1 was complete. I slept for 4 hours. I was awake at 5:00 a.m. on Saturday, the wedding day. I ordered black coffee from room service and sat on the balcony. The sun rose, burning the fog off the water, revealing a day of piercing, brilliant, unsympathetic beauty. At 6:00 a.m., the rest of the convoy arrived at my house. 3 massive equipment trucks, the 15-person crew photographers, lighting technicians, stylists, even 2 models spilled out and passed the security checkpoint. They began unloading C-stands, heavy-duty cables, and massive silver-backed diffusion panels. They were setting up the first shot on my main lawn, the exact, manicured rectangle of grass my mother had designated for the ceremony. At 8:15 a.m., a Greywater Bay Sheriff's cruiser rolled up, lights off. This was the first critical test. I held my breath. A single deputy stepped out. He walked calmly to the gate. The security guard met him, holding a clipboard. I knew what was on it: the notarized contract, the filed police notification, the crew manifest, and Daniel Reeves's insurance certificate. The deputy read. He took his time. He looked at the house. He looked at the trucks. He looked at his own notes. He spoke to the guard for perhaps 2 minutes. It was a calm, professional exchange. Then he nodded. Handed the clipboard back, got in his cruiser, and drove away. The legal perimeter was now reinforced by the state. My steel trap was set and armed. For the next 2 hours, I watched them work. They laid dolly tracks across the grass where the aisle was meant to be. They positioned a 12-foot-high lighting rig where the string quartet was supposed to sit. They were professionals, and they were, in their complete indifference, my perfect, unwitting army. At 10:29 a.m., they arrived. I saw the white ribbon first, fluttering from the antenna of my mother's Escalade. She was leading the procession. Behind her, a gleaming white vintage Bentley, undoubtedly carrying Lila. Behind that, a long black stretch limousine for the bridal party, a perfect, hopeful, doomed parade. The Escalade stopped short of the tape. My mother's door flew open before the vehicle had even fully stopped. She emerged, not in her final dress, but in a chaotic flurry of a silk robe and hair curlers, a cell phone already pressed to her ear. She looked stunned. This wasn't a locked door. This was an army. "Excuse me." Her voice was a faint, sharp shriek carried across the water. "Get out of the way. You are in the way." The security guard, a large, impassive man, simply stepped forward and raised his hand, palm out, a universal gesture of "stop." The production manager, a woman with a headset and the clipboard, walked calmly to the gate. "Ma'am, this is a private, closed location shoot." "This is my house," Margaret screamed, a raw, guttural sound. "My family's house. We have a wedding, 200 guests. You need to leave now." The manager didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply held the clipboard out, pointing to the contract. Pointing. I knew. To my signature. My mother's face. It was a kaleidoscope of collapsing realities, the confusion, the disbelief, the dawning, horrific understanding, the surge of pure, apoplectic rage. She jabbed a finger at the manager. "I don't care about your paper. I'm calling the police. I'm calling my daughter." She stabbed at her phone. I watched, fascinated. She was calling me, the daughter in Zurich, the daughter who wasn't answering. Her face grew redder. She was pacing in frantic circles on the public road, her silk robe flapping, a tableau of pure, undone panic. At 10:35 a.m., the first guest shuttle, a 50-passenger bus, rolled up behind the limousine. The doors hissed open. Guests in bright dresses and pressed suits began to filter out, blinking in the sunlight. They saw the chaos, the massive trucks, the security, my mother, screaming into a phone in her bathrobe, and then, like a single, choreographed move, the phones came out, dozens of them. They began to lift, small black mirrors capturing the scene. The guests weren't helping. They were recording. The public humiliation, the collateral damage my mother had always used as a weapon against me, had just turned on her. At 10:40 a.m., the door of the vintage Bentley opened. Lila. She emerged, a cloud of white veil and beaded silk, the $8,000 dress. She stepped out, not onto a carpet of roses, but onto the gritty, oil-stained asphalt of the coastal road. I watched the pristine white hem of that expensive dress drag in the dirt. It was a single, visceral, agonizing cut. She was a ghost, a prop, a child in a costume. Her hands, holding a bouquet, went to her mouth. She looked at the trucks, at her screaming mother, at the line of security. Her entire adult reality was dissolving in front of her. At 10:41 a.m., the limousine door opened. Evan Cole. He got out, looking sharp in his tuxedo. He assessed the scene in a single, sweeping glance. He saw the production trucks, not floral vans. He saw the professional security. He saw the size, the scale, the expense of the operation facing him. He saw the police would be useless. He saw his primary asset, my house. The Hale estate was gone. He did not go to Lila. He did not go to Margaret. He turned his back to his bride, pulled his own phone from his pocket, put it to his ear, and walked 10 paces away, speaking urgently. He wasn't comforting. He wasn't managing. He was divesting. The merger was off. At 10:45 a.m., the sheriff's cruiser returned. My mother must have called 911. The same deputy stepped out. Margaret rushed him, her voice cracking, gesticulating wildly at the house, at the crew, at the contract. The deputy held up a hand. He listened patiently. He then walked past her, spoke briefly to the production manager again, and turned to face the crowd. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice was the calm, amplified voice of the law. Folks, this property is under a legally binding, exclusive lease for a commercial production. We have verified the documentation. The production company are the legal tenants. Anyone attempting to cross this perimeter will be trespassing. I'm going to have to ask you to clear the public roadway and disperse. It was not a request. It was an order. The word hit the crowd like a physical blow. The wedding wasn't delayed. It wasn't moving inside. It was over. It did not exist. The guests began to murmur, a low, embarrassed hum. They turned, a slow, collective retreat, back to their cars, back to the shuttle, phones still held high, capturing the final pathetic moments. Evan finished his call. He straightened his tuxedo jacket. He looked once, a cold, final glance, at Lila's back. Then he walked to the black limousine, got in, and shut the door. Margaret Hale stood alone in the middle of the road, her arms limp at her sides. Her face was a white mask of ruin. Lila hadn't moved. She was just a statue of white silk, soiled at the hem, staring at the yellow tape that separated her from a life that was never real. At 11:00 a.m., the road was clearing. The wedding had evaporated. Across the bay, on my lawn, I saw a flicker of movement. A technician adjusted a massive silver panel, angling the harsh, beautiful sunlight. A photographer shouted a direction, and the crew, indifferent to the broken pieces of my family on the road, continued their work. I lowered the binoculars, my arms aching. I stepped back inside my hotel room and slid the heavy glass door shut, cutting off the sound of the surf. It was done. I stayed in the Harborview suite for the rest of Saturday. I did not check out. I didn't answer the 58 frantic, incoherent text messages from my father, or the 11 voicemails, each one a different shade of hysteria from my mother. I was, after all, in an emergency meeting in Zurich. I watched the production crew for Coastal Frame LLC, my saviors in matching black polo shirts, as they meticulously finished their work. They broke down the lighting rigs, packed the cameras, and swept the lawn clean, their professionalism an antiseptic to the emotional filth of the morning. By 6 p.m. on Sunday, as per the contract, they were gone. The house, from my vantage point across the bay, was dark and silent once more. The legal perimeter had dissolved. The house was mine again, but the war had just moved to a new theater. Around 2:00 p.m. on Saturday, while the crew was still shooting the master bedroom, the digital aftershock began. It started not as a wave, but as a tremor, a single video, posted to TikTok by a guest named Seattle Sarah 123. It was the 30-second clip that would change everything. Filmed from the shuttle bus. It was a masterpiece of unintentional, brutal storytelling. It opened on my mother. Her face contorted, screaming, "This is my house," in her silk robe. It panned to the impassive security guard, then to the arriving deputy. It zoomed in on Lila, a perfect, tragic statue of white silk, her dress pooling in the dirt. It climaxed with the deputy's amplified voice, cutting through the chaos. "Clear the public roadway and disperse." The caption was simple. "Craziest wedding ever. Bride's family gets kicked out of their own house by police. Greywater Wedding Gate wedding fail." Karen, I watched it, then I watched it again. By 4:00 p.m., it had 50,000 views. By 8:00 p.m., it had been ripped, remixed with the Oh No song, and reposted to Instagram, where it broke 1 million. By Sunday morning, Greywater Wedding Gate was the #1 trending topic in Seattle. The comments section was a battlefield, a raw dissection of my family, fought by strangers. The split was binary. There was Team Margaret. What kind of heartless monster does this to their own sister on her wedding day? It's just a house. This is unforgivable. That poor, beautiful bride. That sister is a sociopath. I hope her family disowns her. And then there was Team Cassidy, a smaller but more analytical group. NTA, the mother in the bathrobe screaming, "My house," feels off. That's not the vibe of an actual owner. Hold on. The caption says, "Bride's family." What about the bride's sister? Wait, I Googled it. That house isn't the family's. It belongs to the other sister, the one who wasn't there. Why wasn't she there? Was she even invited? My quiet contractual maneuver had become a public referendum on family dynamics. The local blogs pounced. The Puget Sound Ledger ran an opinion piece titled, "Entitled Parents, Final Boundaries, Why the Greywater." Wedding Gate is a parable for our times. A therapist on YouTube, Dr. Cindy explained, posted a 20-minute reaction video titled, "A Psychologist Breaks Down the Narcissistic Family System in Viral Wedding Video." My mother's Hale legacy was now a case study in public humiliation. Her name, which she had polished for decades, was toxic. I knew she wouldn't stand for it. She would never apologize. She would never admit the truth. She would escalate. On Sunday afternoon, she did. A new post appeared on her Facebook page. It was public. The photo she chose was a work of genius. It was an old picture, taken 6 years ago during her gallbladder surgery. She was in a hospital bed, looking pale and wan, an IV line visible in her hand. The text was a tactical nuke. "To all our dear friends and family, who have been so supportive, my heart is broken by the cruel, vicious, and misleading videos circulating online. My only crime was wanting to give my youngest daughter one perfect day. What those videos don't show, what no one knows, is the private, agonizing battle I have been fighting." I felt my blood run cold. I knew what was coming. For the last 3 months, I have been privately battling a terrifying diagnosis, stage 3 ovarian cancer. We wanted to have the wedding at our beloved family home, a place of healing and memories, before I start the aggressive chemotherapy next week. The stress, the confusion, the legal misunderstanding over the house, it was all orchestrated to hurt us in our time of deepest need. We have been shattered. We ask for privacy, for prayers, and, only if you can find it in your heart, for help with the crushing medical bills that have already begun to pile up. God bless. And there it was. The link, a brand new, freshly minted GoFundMe page. The Margaret Hale Healing Fund. Goal, $100,000. I stared at the screen. I was not angry. I was impressed. In a single move, she had reframed the entire narrative. She was no longer the entitled, screaming aggressor. She was a dying matriarch. I was no longer the daughter enforcing a boundary. I was a monster, withholding a dying wish and kicking a cancer patient off her property. This was not a social battle. This was no longer a property dispute. This was federal wire fraud. My Zurich trip was over. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying. The risk analyst was back on the clock. Hypothesis. Margaret Hale is not sick. Action. Verify. I didn't need to do much digging. My mother's entire life was a public performance. I opened my encrypted evidence drive and created a new subfolder, Dossier D Fraud, Exhibit D1. I went to her closest friend, Cynthia Davies's public Facebook page. Date October 4th, 3 weeks ago, a photo album titled Ridgeline Gala. There was Margaret, in a backless, sequined red dress, champagne flute in hand, dancing. The caption, Dancing the Night Away with My Bestie Margaret, So Much Fun. Hale Legacy Charity Ball. Exhibit D2. I went to the Instagram page for Bella to Salon Spa. My mother's preferred temple of vanity. Date October 14th. 1 week ago, a tagged photo. So excited to give the wonderful Margaret Hale her full pre-wedding glam package. Getting her ready for her daughter's big day. You look radiant, Margaret. She was in a fluffy white robe, smiling, her face covered in a gold-flecked mask. Exhibit D3, my own inbox, an email from my father's golf club, sent 2 days ago. Subject holiday wine tasting event. Dear Howard and Margaret, we look forward to seeing you both. She wasn't battling stage 3 cancer. She was battling laugh lines and a tough tea time. I saved the screenshots. I archived the URLs. I saved a complete PDF of the GoFundMe page, including the initial burst of donations. $4, 350s in the first hour. The comments were a river of misplaced sympathy. Margaret, you brave soul, we are praying for you. I am disgusted by what your daughter did. Absolutely sociopathic behavior. I picked up the phone and called Marilyn. She's claiming stage 3 ovarian cancer, I said, and she started a GoFundMe. The line was silent. When Marilyn spoke, all the folksy bake sale charm was gone. Her voice was pure, cold, prosecutorial ice. Cassidy, listen to me very carefully. This is a felony. This is obtaining money by false pretenses, which is theft. And because she is using an online platform, it is wire fraud, which is a federal crime. This is no longer family drama. This is prison time. What do I do? Marilyn? Do I post my proof? Do I call her? You do nothing, she commanded. Not publicly. You do not confront her. You do not warn her. You let her dig. You let her collect the money. You archive every single donation. You save every comment. You are building a new case file. This is not for a family argument. This is for the state attorney general. Let her commit the crime, fully and completely. Then, we report it to GoFundMe's trust and safety team and law enforcement, simultaneously. We have her on fraud, and we have her on libel. Do not tip your hand. I hung up. I went back to my evidence folder. I added the salon photo, the gala photo. I re-archived the original Seattle Coast Living article, the one that called my house the family estate. I added the physical, scanned copy of the wedding invitation, the one that listed my address as the venue. The file was getting thick. Then, in the deluge of sympathetic comments on my mother's GoFundMe, a new voice appeared. It was a small crack in her narrative wall. A comment from Helen Hale, my father's second cousin from Oregon, a quiet, religious woman I hadn't seen in years. She had posted directly on the GoFundMe link. Margaret, my goodness, I am so terribly sorry to hear of this devastating illness. I am praying for your full recovery. I am, however, a bit confused. I was at dear Catherine's funeral 5 years ago. I seem to recall her will being very clear that she left that beautiful house on the bay, and all its contents, directly and solely to Cassidy. I am praying for your health, Margaret. But I'm also praying for the truth here, as it all seems very upsetting. It was a polite, devastating, precision-guided missile. The replies to Helen's comment began almost immediately. Wait, what? It's not the family's house. If it's Cassidy's house, why would they plan a wedding there without her? Is the mom lying about the house? If she's lying about the house, is she lying about... The public narrative was beginning to fracture. I checked on the other 2 points of the triangle. Lila, her Instagram, once a waterfall of bride-to-be and perfect day, was a ghost town. She had not posted. She had not deleted. Her profile picture was still that smiling, hopeful engagement shot with Evan. It was a digital freeze, a monument to her humiliation, left for all to see. It was the online equivalent of a catatonic state. And Evan was the opposite. Evan was a scorched earth, his Instagram profile. The one built on stolen photos of yachts and watches, user not found, his LinkedIn profile. The one listing the fake EC Capital Partners, deleted. He was gone. The con artist had seen the asset he was targeting my house publicly and legally locked down. He had seen the family he was marrying into, revealed as a chaotic, screaming liability. He had seen his mark, Lila, standing soiled and abandoned. He had cut his losses. The merger was off. He had taken his limousine and his $450 ring and vanished. I checked out of the Harborview Hotel on Sunday night, the production complete. I drove back to my Seattle apartment, the encrypted SSD drive in my bag. I had not said a single word in my own defense. I didn't need to. Evan had fled the truth. Lila was paralyzed by it, and my mother, in her infinite, arrogant desperation, had just tried to fight it by building a bigger, more dangerous, and more criminally fraudulent lie. And I had the receipts. The digital storm raged online for 2 days. Greywater Wedding Gate became a meme, a cautionary tale, a Rorschach test for online commentators. My mother's GoFundMe page became the epicenter of the conflict, a public ledger of her deception. Donations had climbed to over $7,000 before Helen Hale's quiet. Devastating comment had planted the seed of doubt. Now, the donations had stalled. The tide of public opinion was turning from sympathy to suspicion. I spent Monday and Tuesday in a state of controlled, operational calm. I worked from my apartment, coordinating with my team at Northbridge, my mind a clean, cold machine during the day. At night, I collated my evidence. I downloaded a full record of the GoFundMe page, every donation, every comment, and sent the file to Marilyn. I was building the case, brick by factual brick. I did not contact my family. I did not need to. They were trapped in the wreckage they had created. On Tuesday afternoon, a package arrived with my regular mail. It was a large, 9x12 envelope made of thick, pale blue paper, the kind of expensive, archival quality stationery that screams legal documents. The embossed return address was for a law firm I didn't recognize, Whitman, Shaw Associates. A handwritten note on the front read, "Personal confidential for Ms. Cassidy Hale." I took it to my desk. I slid it open with a letter opener, a slow, deliberate slice. Inside was not a legal threat. It was a ghost. A cover letter, on the same heavy stationery, was clipped to a thick, bound document. It was from a man named Arthur Whitman. Esca. "Dear Ms. Hale," it began. "I am writing to you on the occasion of my retirement and the final dissolution of my law practice. In reviewing the contents of our firm's archival safe, I came across this document, which was entrusted to us by your late grandmother, Mrs. Catherine Hale. It appears to be her final will and testament, along with a personal letter for you. My deepest apologies for the 5-year delay in its delivery. The document was filed under your grandmother's maiden name by a junior partner who has long since left the firm. It was an unfortunate clerical error, which I have only just discovered. Please accept this as the official and final execution of my duties regarding her estate." My breath caught in my throat. I unclipped the letter. The document was thick, bound with a blue ribbon, the last will and testament of Catherine Hale. My mother, as the executor of my grandmother's estate, had presented a different will 5 years ago, a simple, straightforward document that had left the house to me. Yes, but had split the liquid assets a considerable sum evenly between my father, me, and Lila. It had seemed fair. It had seemed, I realize now, exactly like something my mother would have written. I untied the ribbon. I began to read the true will. The language was dense, legalistic, but the intent was clear as glass. My grandmother had left a few specific heirlooms to my father. Then came the core of it. To my beloved granddaughter, Cassidy Hale, in recognition of her strength, her integrity, and her quiet fortitude, I bequeath the remainder of my estate, constituting approximately 70% of its total value. This includes, but is not limited to, the entirety of my stock portfolio, my savings, and sole, unencumbered title to my property at my address, Greywater Bay, 70%, not a third. My eyes scanned down the page, looking for the other names. To my daughter-in-law, Margaret Hale, I leave my personal photo albums and my collection of costume jewelry in the hopes that these sentimental items will bring her fond memories. Photo albums and fake jewelry. It was a brutal, posthumous slap. A clause below it explained why. This decision is made in light of the substantial and repeated financial gifts provided to Margaret and my son, Howard, during my lifetime, for the stated purposes of maintaining their social standing and financing their various lifestyle endeavors. Tucked inside the back of the bound will was another envelope, a smaller, personal one. My name was on the front, written in my grandmother's elegant, familiar script. My hands were trembling as I opened it. This was the letter from the beyond. "My dearest Cassidy," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and the lawyers have finally untangled all the knots. I am writing this to you, and only you, because you are the only one who needs to understand. I have left you the bulk of my estate, and I have left you the house. I know this will cause a firestorm with your mother. I am not doing it to be cruel. I am doing it to be clear. Your mother is a wonderful performer, but she is a terrible steward. She values appearances over foundations. Over the years, I have given her and your father more than $200,000 to pay off debts from parties, club memberships, and bad investments, all to protect the Hale name she is so obsessed with. That was my gift to my son, but my legacy, the real one, is for you. This house is your fortress, Cassidy. It is not a stage for your mother's ambitions or a soft landing for your sister's whims. It is yours. Do not ever let anyone call it family property. It is a word they will use to steal it from you, piece by piece, until it is no longer your sanctuary, but your burden. Be kind. Be generous. But you must be the gatekeeper. Your strength is your quietness, my love. But do not ever let your silence be mistaken for consent. All my love, always, your grandmother, Catherine. I sat at my desk, the letter in my hand, tears blurring the words. $200,000, a fortress. Do not let your silence be mistaken for consent. She had seen it all. She had known, 5 years ago, the exact battle I would be fighting today. And then, the final, cold, analytical piece clicked into place. The first will the one my mother had produced, had named her as the sole executor of the estate, which meant this true will, the one I was holding, had been in her possession first. The law firm's clerical error was a lie, a polite fiction. My mother had received this will, seen its contents, and buried it. She had committed a crime, a profound breach of fiduciary duty. She hadn't just trespassed on my property, she had stolen my inheritance. I stood up. The time for digital evidence and remote observation was over. I put Catherine's letter and the blue-bound will back into the large envelope. I walked out of my apartment, got in my car, and drove to my parents' house, the perfect manicured lawn, the gleaming, oversized windows, a fortress of appearances. I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. My father answered. His face was a wreck of sleeplessness and shame. "Cassidy," he breathed. "Your mother? She's not well. I need to speak with both of you," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. I walked past him, into the immaculate living room. My mother was on the sofa, a cashmere throw over her legs. She wasn't pale or wan. She was coiled, a viper of simmering rage. "So," she hissed, "the monster returns from Zurich." I didn't answer her. I walked to the marble coffee table. I took the pale blue envelope from under my arm, and I placed it, squarely, in the center of the table. The silence in the room was absolute. "Explain this," I said. My father stared at the embossed return address. All the color drained from his face. My mother just looked at it, her expression unreadable. I don't know what that is," she said, her voice a little too high. "It's from Arthur Whitman's office," I said. "He's retiring. He was cleaning out the archives." My father made a small, choking sound. He sank into a chair. "Oh, God," he whispered. "Oh, God. Margaret." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "It was easier. Cass, your mother. She was inconsolable after Catherine's death. About the will. She said it was cruel. She said it would tear the family apart. I wanted peace. I wanted peace." The lifelong mantra of the accomplice. My mother finally broke. She shot up from the sofa. "Peace. I was protecting this family. I was protecting the greater good. That will was a vicious, hateful document designed to drive a wedge between my children. I did what any mother would do. I protected you. I protected Lila from the truth of what her grandmother thought of us." "You protected the money," I said, my voice ablaze. "You buried her will and filed a fraudulent one so you could get your hands on her liquid assets. You stole from me, and you stole from Lila. And you did it to pay for all this." I gestured around the perfect, expensive room. "How dare you!" She started to scream, her face a mask of indignation. And then the phone rang. It was the house line, a shrill, piercing sound that cut through her rage. My father, moving like a robot, answered it. "Hello, Lila, darling. Calm down. What is it? What's wrong?" He listened, his face turning ashen. "He what?" "Since when? No, don't do anything. Stay right there." He hung up the phone. He looked at my mother, then at me. His voice was a hollow whisper. "Evan's gone. He packed his bags yesterday. He cleared out their joint bank account. Lila's been calling him for 24 hours. He just texted her back. One sentence. 'Sorry, this is too much for me.'" My mother stared, her mouth agape, her grand prize, the successful son-in-law. The final piece of her Hale legacy had just evaporated. I looked at my father. I looked at my mother. Her face finally, truly, stripped of all artifice, showing only the raw shock of total defeat. Then I pulled out my own phone and dialed Lila. She answered on the first ring with a raw, broken sob. "Lila," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through her tears. "I need you to get in your car. I need you to come to Mom and Dad's house, right now." "Why?" she wept. "What's the point? It's all over." "No," I said. "It's not over. It's just beginning. Come here. Today is for the truth." Lila arrived 30 minutes later. She didn't look like a jilted bride. She looked like a refugee. Her face was pale and puffy, stripped of makeup, her hair pulled back in a severe, messy knot. She wore gray sweatpants and a shapeless university hoodie. The $8,000 dress, the Vera Wang masterpiece, was nowhere to be seen. She walked into the living room, her eyes darting between my mother's stony rage, my father's collapsed shame, and my own implacable calm. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice raw. "What's the truth, Cass?" I didn't answer her with words. I reached into my bag and took out the small, velvet ring box. I opened it and placed it on the marble table. The massive, glassy stone flashed under the recessed lighting. Then, I placed the tri-folded appraisal document from Maxwell Sons beside it. Lila stared at the ring, the symbol of her entire, shattered future. "What is that?" she asked. "That," I said, my voice quiet, "is the official appraisal. The stone is a 4-carat equivalent cubic zirconia. The band is silver-plated. Its total retail value is $450. Lila didn't cry. A strange, unnerving stillness came over her. She looked at the ring, then at her own bare finger, as if only now realizing it was gone. She was processing the first layer of the fraud, the financial lie, the cheap prop at the center of her expensive wedding. He told me it was a family heirloom, she whispered. He lied, I said, about that and about everything else. I took out my phone. I had the screenshot saved in a single, dedicated album. I didn't need to search. I turned the screen toward her. This is the second lie, I said. The one that matters. The image was a screenshot from a verified Instagram account. A woman named Sarah Doyle, a name I knew from the tech pages of the Wall Street Journal, was smiling. Her arm around Evan. She was wearing a different ring. A real one. An elegant emerald-cut diamond. Evan was beaming. The same practiced, charming smile he'd used on all of us. The post was dated 6 months ago. The caption was simple. Future Mrs. Cole. I said yes. Lila stared at the screen. Her hand went to her mouth. Not in shock, but as if to physically stifle a sob. She wasn't just the victim of a con. She was the backup plan. She was the other woman who didn't even know she was the other woman. She was the low-cost acquisition he'd pursued when his primary, wealthier target was in the wings. She was never the one. I don't believe you, she choked out, looking not at me, but at my mother. Mom, he loves me. My mother, seeing her opening, surged forward. Of course he loves you. Darling, this is Cassidy. This is what she does. She's a cruel, jealous, vindictive monster. She couldn't stand to see you happy. So she concocted these horrible lies and she destroyed your wedding. These are not lies, I said. I stood up and walked back to the coffee table. I reached into my bag again. I pulled out the exclusive license and service agreement with Coastal Frame LLC, its notarized seal clearly visible. I placed it on the table. Beside it, I placed a copy of the Notice of Commercial Filming Activity filed with the Greywater Bay Sheriff's Department. This is the contract that leased my house for the weekend, I said, my voice cutting through my mother's rising hysteria. And this is the police notification that was filed 2 weeks ago. My actions were not a tantrum. They were a legal, pre-planned, contractual inevitability. You were never getting into that house. I turned my eyes, cold and direct, to my mother. Her face was turning from red to a blotchy, mottled white. Now, I said, a simple question. In the Seattle Coast Living article, and on the invitations, whose house did you call the Hale family estate? She stared at me. Her mouth opened, then closed. There was no answer. The lie was too public, too documented. She was trapped. My father let out a long, shuddering sigh. He looked at the pale blue envelope on the table, Catherine's true will. It's all my fault, he said, his voice thick with a lifetime of regret. I knew about the will. I knew what Margaret was doing. I knew it was wrong. But I avoided it. I chose to be quiet. I chose peace over truth. And this ruin, this is the price of that peace. Lila was looking at me now, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrific clarity. She saw the will. She saw the contract. She saw the picture of the other fiancé. The gears were turning. I softened my voice. I was not looking at an accomplice anymore. I was looking at a victim. Lila, I said, none of this was your fault. You were a pawn in his game, and in hers, but the game is over, and you have a choice. For the first time, you get to choose what happens next, starting right now. As I said it, my phone buzzed in my hand, a text message. It was from Marilyn. Cassidy, the GoFundMe donations just passed $8,200. I have the full donor list, IP addresses, and every comment archived. The file is ready to be sent to the State Attorney General's office. Fraud Division, awaiting your signal. The third lie, the most dangerous one. I held the phone up, not showing them the screen, but letting the significance of the interruption hang in the air. I looked at my mother. "We have one last piece of business," I said. "Your GoFundMe. Your stage 3 ovarian cancer." My father flinched. Lila's head snapped toward my mother, her expression one of utter disbelief. "That is a federal crime," I stated, my voice flat. "You have, as of this moment, defrauded over 100 people out of more than $8,000. So here is your final choice. Mom, you have two options. Option A. You shut down the page immediately. You issue a full public retraction and apology, stating you had a misdiagnosis, and you personally refund every single dollar. Option B. You do nothing, and Marilyn Shaw forwards this entire file to the authorities. You can deal with a social media scandal, or you can deal with a federal indictment. The choice is yours. You have 1 hour. I had expected my mother to scream, to deny, to collapse into a puddle of victimhood. But she just stared at me, her mind clearly racing, trying to calculate a new angle, a new way to spin the narrative. But before she could speak, a new voice cut through the silence. It was Lila. She stood up from the sofa, her back straight for the first time. She looked directly at our mother, her eyes clear of tears, filled with a cold, hard, newfound emptiness. "Enough," she said. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a plea. It was a verdict. "Just enough. Mom, no more." Lila's single word, "enough," was a period at the end of a long, terrible sentence. It hung in the air, more powerful than any of my mother's screams or my father's apologies. It was the sound of a puppet cutting its own strings. My mother stared at her, utterly defeated. Not by me, not by the contracts or the evidence, but by the one person she thought she would always control. I gave my ultimatum one last look. Then I turned and walked out of their house. I did not look back. The next morning, the dominoes began to fall, not with a crash, but with the quiet, inexorable click of legal and social consequences. At 9:00 a.m., a formal letter from Marilyn Shaw, Esca. He was messengered to the editorial offices of Seattle Coast Living magazine. It was not a threat. It was a demand for correction. It cited the original article, the false attribution of my property as a family estate, and included a certified copy of the deed. It requested a full retraction of the photograph and a public clarification of ownership, citing journalistic ethics and liability for misrepresentation. The magazine's legal department, I knew, would not fight it. The evidence was absolute. At 10:17 a.m., my mother's GoFundMe page was deactivated. A new, final post appeared on her Facebook page. The apology was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive, self-pitying prose. Due to a miraculous and unexpected positive turn in my health, and a very confusing clerical misdiagnosis, I am overjoyed to say that my recent health scare is over. I am so grateful for the outpouring of support. All donations will be refunded in full. It was a lie wrapped in a half-truth. But at the very bottom, beneath the flowery nonsense, was the sentence Marilyn and I had insisted upon, the one that served as her signature on the terms of surrender. To also clarify any confusion from the weekend's events, the Greywater Bay House has been the sole private property of my daughter, Cassidy Hale, since 2019. She had chosen option A. Her choice didn't stop the official gears from turning. At 2:00 p.m. on Wednesday, I received a call from Marilyn. "A little bird told me that the Washington State Consumer Protection Division has reached out to your mother," she said, her voice dry. "Apparently, they take a keen interest when a GoFundMe is abruptly shut down following online accusations of fraud. They just want to ask a few questions about her clerical misdiagnosis. She will be forced to cooperate." The state, unlike me, did not accept muddled apologies. That Saturday, 1 week after the wedding that never was, I drove back to my house. The first thing I did was call a 24-hour locksmith. I had every single lock on the property. The doors, the gates, the garage replaced, the old keys, the ones my parents had. the one Lila had, were now just useless pieces of metal. I sent a single, certified letter to my parents' address. It was not emotional. It was a formal notice. Effective immediately, all prior assumed access to the property at my address is revoked. Any future visit must be preceded by a formal invitation and my express written consent. Unannounced visits will be considered trespassing. I was no longer a daughter setting a boundary. I was a homeowner defining the terms of access. Lila did not go back to my parents' house. She moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood they would have considered beneath them. I saw on her Venmo feed, the only social media she hadn't deleted, that she sold the Vera Wang dress to a high-end consignment shop. 2 days later, a package arrived at my door. Inside was the antique diamond necklace my mother had gifted her for the wedding, a piece that had actually belonged to my grandmother Catherine, and which my mother had taken from the estate. There was no note. None was needed. It was an act of severance. Lila started a new job the following week, an administrative position at a nonprofit, a job she had found herself. She blocked Evan's number. She was building a new life from the rubble, one small, authentic brick at a time. The retraction in Seattle Coast Living came out in their next issue. It was small, buried on page 12, but it was there, a quiet, definitive correction of the record. The online version, however, was picked up by the same blogs that had feasted on the initial drama. The new narrative spread slowly, but with the weight of truth. The final analysis, from a popular legal blogger, went viral in its own small way. The Hale family saga is over, but the lesson is timeless. Wording matters. Ownership matters. Consent matters. And sometimes, a notarized contract is the loudest voice in the room. My father came to see me a month later. He stood on my front porch, not daring to touch the new doorknob until I opened the door. He was smaller. Somehow, the lifelong habit of avoidance had cost him his stature. "I'm sorry, Cassidy," he said, the words clumsy, inadequate. "I failed you. I failed both my children. I failed my wife by letting her believe her own lies." I looked at him, not with anger, but with a profound, weary sadness. "I don't need your words, Dad," I said. "I need your actions. I need you to learn to be a gatekeeper for the truth, not just a doorman for my mother's fantasies." For the first time in his life, faced with a hard truth instead of an easy peace, he simply nodded. That evening, I stood on the back porch of my house. The air was cold, smelling of salt and wet stone. There were no cameras, no vendors, no wedding guests. Just the rhythmic sigh of the waves and the cry of a distant gull. It was the same sound I'd heard the day I discovered their plot, but it was different now. It was no longer a backdrop to a violation. It was just the sound of my own peace. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a number I didn't recognize. It was a text. The message contained a single, stunningly beautiful photograph, an image of my living room. The late afternoon light pouring through the windows. The architecture framed with an artist's eye. The house looked magnificent, breathtaking, a place of strength and beauty. Beneath the photo, a short line of text. "The final shots for the catalog. They're perfect. Thank you. Homeowner, Daniel Reeves." Homeowner, not Cassidy, not Ms. Hale. He had used the one title that mattered. I smiled. A real smile. I slid the glass door shut, the sound a satisfying, final click. I walked to my kitchen, poured myself a glass of cold water, and took a small, yellow sticky note from a drawer. I wrote 2 words on it, in black, capital letters. Then I walked to the inside of my front door and stuck the note at eye level. A final, private declaration. Silence. Consent. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means the world to me. I'm always so curious to know where my voice is reaching. So please, comment below and let me know where you're tuning in from. Let's connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like. And for extra support, hitting that hype button helps this story reach even more listeners who need to hear it.